The trees were gnarled and ancient, and the grass stretched out toward the horizon like a sea of honey. Under the setting sun, a river flowed steadily past a bustling marketplace in the distance. I opened my eyes slowly. The world was spinning, and a wave of nausea hit me so hard I felt like my head was splitting open. Where was I? Just a moment ago, I had been walking through a museum. In the blink of an eye, everything had changed. I forced myself to sit up, my muscles protesting. To my shock, I wasn't alone. 3 other men were sitting up with me. They were dressed like people from an ancient era, wearing tattered, coarse hemp tunics with their hair pulled back in traditional top knots. 2 of them were young. One was built like an ox, a literal giant of a man with muscles like a temple guard. The other was incredibly handsome, looking like a flower boy straight out of a modern idol drama. The third man was middle-aged, around 40 or 50, with a face so plain you'd forget it the moment he turned away. To my right, a 5th man lay motionless in the grass. He was as thin as a rail. Looking at our positions, the 5 of us were arranged in a small circle. In the center sat a crudely woven bamboo basket. Nearby, there was a clay pot with a blackened bottom, sitting over the remains of a fire. It held a bit of leftover broth. Next to it was a wooden bowl with a large ladle resting on top, filled with a dark, murky liquid. The scent wafted over to me. It smelled like vinegar. We stared at each other in stunned silence. Nobody knew what to say. Habitually, I reached up to push my glasses back onto the bridge of my nose, but my fingers met only skin. I didn't have glasses anymore. The middle-aged man must have caught the gesture. He stared at me, his voice trembling with uncertainty. W. Wong? Dr. Wong. I froze. Su-bin. It's me. It's really me, he cried out, relief washing over his face. Then his eyes widened. How did we get here? And you, what happened to you? A sudden realization struck me. I scrambled to my feet and ran toward the riverbank. The other 3 followed close behind. I leaned over the water and looked at my reflection. Instead of my usual face, a teenager stared back at me. He looked no older than 17 or 18. He had clear eyes, a high bridge to his nose, and features that could be described as delicate. But his face was deathly pale, and his frame was so thin he looked fragile, almost timid. His eyes were slightly bloodshot, reflecting deep exhaustion. I wasn't wearing my glasses, yet I could see everything with perfect clarity. I hadn't experienced vision this sharp since I was in the 6th grade. Behind me, an uncontrollable laugh broke the silence. It was the handsome flower boy. He was jumping around, waving his arms in pure excitement. We traveled back. We actually crossed over. I've read 1,000 web novels about this, and it's finally happening. That museum trip was worth it. Haha. And look at me. I'm so handsome. He touched his face, then glanced at the rest of us to confirm he was indeed the best-looking one in the group. He was ecstatic. The muscular giant started stretching, his joints popping like firecrackers. He threw a few punches into the air, testing his new body. He looked at the handsome kid with pure disdain. This is the ancient world, kid. You can't be a celebrity here. What good is a pretty face? The handsome boy didn't care. He was too high on adrenaline. It might not be the real past. It could be a fantasy world or a parallel universe. Dream on, the giant grunted. We were in a museum. This is history. It's ancient China. Even better, the boy shouted. I can plagiarize poetry, lyrics, novels. We should divide them up so we don't overlap. I'll take the famous poems. The giant snorted. Plagiarize a novel? You think this is a script? I'd like to see you try to write Dream of the Red Chamber from memory. Go ahead, give me the first chapter. The boy faltered. Well, maybe I can't, but someone else can. He turned to me. You're a doctor, right? What was your major? I'm not a doctor yet. I corrected him. I'm a PhD student. The boy looked confused. Is there a difference? You're only a doctor after you defend your dissertation. I'm in my 2nd year. The giant cut in loudly. What do you study? Literature, I said. The giant laughed mockingly. Then you're useless. Literature doesn't mean you know history. You're dead weight in a crossover. Su-bin, the middle-aged man, jumped to my defense. He had been sent by a publishing house to work with me on a collection of papers for the museum. Dr. Wong is an expert in classical literature. So what? The giant snapped. Does he know history? Can he write down Dream of the Red Chamber from memory? He glared at me as if he'd just stated an absolute truth. Let me tell you something. Even a postdoc couldn't rewrite that book from memory. It's impossible. The handsome boy looked at me, hopeful. Can you really not do it? Of course he can't, the giant said impatiently. Nobody in the entire country could. Am I right, doctor? I didn't answer. I had no interest in this mindless debate. I wasn't going to explain the nuances of classical philology or the difference between broad and narrow literary views to a man like him. As for Dream of the Red Chamber, that was the least of my concerns. Literature changes with the era. A masterpiece from one century might be ignored in another. Li Bai's poems might have been lost in the pre-Qin era. Su Shi's works might have been dismissed as vulgar folk tunes if written a few centuries earlier. We didn't even know what time period we were in. Plagiarizing poems? Every era has its geniuses. Even the greats like Li Bai or Su Shi struggled in their careers despite their talent. Su Bin tried to argue back. Do you even know what a readology expert is? People have spent their whole lives studying and even finishing the manuscript. The giant didn't know the name Su Bin mentioned, but he was quick to bark back. Who cares about sequels? Can they match the original? I'm talking about writing it word for word. It's impossible. As they bickered, I interrupted them. Don't you notice something strange about our voices? The three of them stopped and looked at me. Nothing's wrong, the handsome boy said. Sounds the same as always. Su Bin thought for a moment. I don't feel anything different. Even the giant nodded in agreement. Wait, I said. I paused, trying to find the right way to explain. I struggled with the sounds, my mouth moving in unfamiliar ways. Finally, I forced out a few words. Peach, blossoms. I stopped, then tried again, syllable by syllable. Peach blossoms bloom. Peach blossoms fade. I exhaled, feeling like those few words had taken every ounce of my energy. The others looked baffled. Peach blossoms bloom. Peach blossoms fade. So what? The boy muttered. Suddenly, Su Bin and the giant froze. Their eyes went wide. Dr. Wong. Su Bin whispered, his voice trembling. What you just said, that was Mandarin. The realization hit us all like a physical blow. Since we had woken up on this grass, we had been speaking in a tone and rhythm we had never heard before. It was a strange, clunky dialect, completely different from modern Mandarin. But we had been understanding each other so perfectly that we hadn't even noticed we weren't speaking our native tongue. Are we? Are we still speaking Chinese? The boy asked, terrified. Yes, I said quietly. But we are speaking Middle Chinese. The pronunciation is vastly different from the modern language. For example, the word for peach. In Mandarin, it starts with a light, aspirated sound. But in the language we are using right now, it's a voiced, level tone. And the word for fade, the initial has completely shifted. I looked around at the ancient landscape. We weren't just in a different place. We were in a world where even our own voices were no longer our own. Let's get practical, the giant interrupted, his voice booming with impatience. Stop acting like a walking textbook. Just tell us what Middle Chinese actually means. It's a scholarly term, I said, keeping my explanation brief. Historians use it to describe the era between the Han and Tang dynasties, the Wei, Jin, and northern and southern periods. It's the bridge before the great Tang Song transformation. The middle-aged man, Su Bin, looked at me with wide, anxious eyes. So, we've traveled back to some dynasty between the Han and the Tang? I nodded. Back in my world, my life's work revolved around pre-Tang literature and the intellectual history of the Tang and Song. If I had to be stuck in history, these were the eras I knew best. I knew the facts, the culture, and the dangers. I could navigate this world. We didn't inherit the original owner's memories, but we got their accents, the boy muttered. He suddenly waved a hand, a grin spreading across his face. Actually, it doesn't matter. This is great. We can plagiarize Song Dynasty poetry. Whatever era this is, those poems haven't been written yet. We're going to be famous. The giant snorted. How many poems do you actually remember? There are 4 of us. How many do we each get? He turned his gaze toward me, his eyes narrowing. Doctor, you're the expert. You must have thousands memorized. Don't go hiding them for yourself. I didn't answer. They were dreaming. Even in the Tang dynasty, poetry was often seen as a minor skill, a mere decoration. You couldn't build a life on a few stolen verses. I thought of the great poets like Lu Yong or Jiang Kuei, men of immense talent who still lived lives of poverty and failure. Stolen words wouldn't save us. No, Subin whispered, his face pale. My mother is still back home. I have to find a way back. We shouldn't be thinking about poems. We need to think about how to go home. He didn't share the boy's excitement. He had a wife. He had a life. He couldn't just walk away from it. Go back? Why? The boy shot back, his chest swelling with newfound confidence. Winning the lottery is easier than time travel. Look at me. I'm young, I'm handsome. I'm clearly the main character of this story. Here, we can have anything we want. Power, women, wine. It beats working a 9-to-5 back home. The giant laughed and looked at Subin. Of course he wants to go back. He didn't get a young body like we did. Hey, old man, how old were you before this? Subin ignored him and grabbed my arm. Dr. Wong, what do we do? I have a daughter. She's only 5 years old. I have to get back. Does the law here limit how many concubines I can have? The boy chimed in, completely ignoring Subin's distress. Why are you asking him? The giant mocked. He doesn't know anything. He knows more than you. Subin snapped back. Enough, I said, my voice sharp. I needed them to focus. Let's talk about what happened right before we got here. Subin, you and I were in the museum, right? We were looking at a soul jar from an ancient tomb. Yes, the boy added, his eyes lighting up. I saw it too. A porcelain jar. I thought for a moment. We were all gathered around that display. That was the trigger. So, the 5 of us were looking at the soul jar, and then, the shift happened. Wait, Subin said, slapping his thigh. I remember now. There were 5 of us around that stand. We all turned. We had forgotten about the 5th person. He was still lying in the grass, struggling to sit up. When he saw us approaching, his thin, gaunt face went ghostly white. The boy ran over, grinning like a maniac. Hey buddy, good news. We traveled through time. This world belongs to us now. He let out a loud, obnoxious laugh. Cringe, the giant muttered. Neither of them noticed that the thin man was trembling. I stepped forward and put a hand on his shoulder. Are you okay? The man didn't speak. He looked dazed, his entire body shaking violently. Talk about a weak constitution, the giant scoffed. No wonder he was the last to wake up. I looked at where we were standing. If we stood in the same positions we occupied back at the museum, we formed a circle. And right in the center of that circle was the bamboo basket. I moved toward it. The giant was faster, reaching out to flip the lid open at the same time I did. Subin and the boy crowded around us. Inside, nestled in the straw, was a beautiful green porcelain jar. Its surface was covered in intricate carvings of buildings and figures. The soul jar. Subin cried out. It's the one from the museum. Is this why we're here? The boy asked, reaching out. What is a soul jar anyway? It's a funerary object, I explained. The ancients believed it could capture and settle the soul of the deceased. And these carvings? The boy touched the side of the jar. Is this a bird? That's the vermilion bird, I said, my eyes locked on the craftsmanship. It guides the soul to the heavens. If there's a secret to our travel, it's hidden in these images. I tried to pull the jar closer, but the giant gripped the other side. He wouldn't let go. If this jar brought us here, Subin said, his voice trembling with hope, it can take us back. Right, Dr. Wong? I didn't have an answer, but I nodded to keep him calm. Let me examine it. The key is in the inscriptions. The giant pulled the jar toward himself. You think you're the only one who knows things? I read a post about these online. Look, there are characters here. Move your hands, doctor. Let me see. I let go. The boy and Subin leaned in, squinting at the porcelain. Where are the words? The boy asked. You have to wash it first, the giant said confidently. The dirt is covering them. I'll take it to the river. He started walking toward the water. I felt a surge of unease and followed him. I'll go with you. No need, he said, his tone suddenly polite. I can handle it. I quickened my pace. Suddenly, the giant broke into a sprint. I chased after him, with the boy and Subin trailing behind, confused. As he reached the riverbank, the giant didn't dip the jar into the water. Instead, he raised it high above his head and slammed it onto a rock with all his strength. The sound of shattering porcelain echoed through the air. We all froze. Subin let out a strangled cry of despair. Before we could react, the giant kicked the largest shards into the rushing river. I lunged toward the bank, but the current was too fast. The pieces were gone. Subin looked like he was about to jump in after them. I grabbed him, holding him back. Subin, calm down. Are you insane? The boy screamed at the giant. The giant just shrugged. You're the idiots. If I let them figure out how to use that thing, they would have dragged us back to our boring lives. I'm staying. Subin's eyes turned bloodshot. He lunged at the giant, but I barked out a command. Stop. My voice was so sharp that Subin froze. But I wasn't looking at him. I was watching the thin man, who had stood up and was trying to slip away into the trees. I ran toward him and blocked his path. Where do you think you're going? The thin man forced a shaky smile. Nowhere, just looking around. I stared deep into his eyes, a thought forming in my mind. Tell me, I said, what's your favorite movie? The boy and the giant looked at me like I had lost my mind. But I kept my eyes on the thin man, waiting for his answer. You idiot, Subin roared, lunging forward and grabbing the giant by his tattered hemp collar. The giant's face darkened instantly. Let go, he growled. I didn't look at them. My eyes were locked on the thin man. His facial muscles were twitching violently now, a mask of pure terror. Just give me one movie. I pressed, stepping closer, my voice low and urgent. Any movie. Just name one. The other three sensed something was wrong. They stopped their bickering and turned to stare at the thin man. The silence in the woods became heavy, suffocating. Suddenly, the thin man snapped. He lunged forward, shoving me back with surprising strength. I stumbled, my heel catching on the edge of the bowl of vinegar we had found earlier. I tripped, and the dark liquid splashed across my legs, soaking my trousers through to the skin. The thin man didn't look back. He turned and bolted into the trees, his voice rising in a hysterical shriek. Ghost! There's a ghost. He's possessed by an evil spirit. I cursed, scrambling to wipe the stinging vinegar from my clothes. After him, I yelled. Quick! He's not like us. He's not from our time. I knew it then. 5 of us had been around that bronze vessel, but only 4 of us had swapped souls. This man belonged here. He was the key to understanding where, and when, we were. The sun was dipping below the horizon, casting long, jagged shadows across the deep grass. We tore through the brush, 4 of us chasing one, our boots trampling insects and snapping dry twigs. Help! Someone help! A ghost! The thin man's screams echoed through the darkening woods, shattering the silence of the evening. Wait! I shouted, gasping for air as I ran. We aren't ghosts. I didn't know how much he had overheard of our conversation when he was pretending to be unconscious. I needed to catch him, not just to keep our secret, but to find out who we were supposed to be in this world. Stop right there. Who goes there? The shout came from the gloom ahead. Several blurry figures stepped out from behind the trees, their silhouettes sharp against the fading light. Help! Save! The thin man waved his arms, sprinting toward the figures. But he never finished the word. A sharp thwack sliced through the air. The thin man stiffened, his momentum carrying him forward until he slammed face first into the dirt. Thwack! Another whistle of a bowstring. The giant reacted with terrifying instinct. He reached out, grabbed Subin by the shoulder, and yanked the older man in front of him like a human shield. Subin didn't even have time to scream. A long, feathered arrow tore through the air and buried itself deep in his throat. The giant let go, dropping to the ground and rolling into a crouch, his arms trembling with adrenaline. Subin collapsed backward. He hit the grass with a sickening thud, blood geysering from his neck and mouth. His body jerked in rhythmic, violent spasms. My heart hammered against my ribs so hard I thought it would break. I had never seen death before. Not like this. This wasn't just an accident. It was a cold-blooded execution. It happened so fast. I barely had time to throw myself onto the ground. I lay there, staring at Subin. His name was actually Su Yu, a well-known editor I had met only this morning. He was the only person I truly knew in this nightmare, and now he was dying less than 2 feet away from me. The remaining 3. Keep your heads down and don't move, a cold voice barked. Move and you're dead. I heard the crunch of many boots on dry leaves. They were close. I didn't dare look up. This one's dead, a voice reported. So is this one. Get up, the leader commanded. Now, I glanced at Subin's blood-soaked corpse one last time and pushed myself up. My legs felt like water. Every ounce of strength had been drained from my body. 9 men stood before us. They wore drab, gray tunics. 2 held bows, arrows notched and aimed straight at my chest. 5 held straight-backed blades, and 1 held a long spear. In the center stood a man in a clean, new robe. A sword hung at his hip, still sheathed. The spearman stood close to him, acting as a bodyguard. "Don't kill us," the boy beside me sobbed, his voice cracking with terror. "Please. We're useful. We know things." The handsome young man's voice was trembling and urgent. This wasn't how he imagined his reincarnation story beginning. This wasn't a power fantasy. It was a nightmare. The leader in the clean robe stepped forward, his eyes cold. "How many of you are there?" he demanded. "Wang Yang, the boy," and I stayed silent. We didn't know how to answer. We didn't even know where we were. "Speak," the leader roared, his hand moving toward his sword. "Speak now or die." The boy flinched, the words tumbling out of him in a panic. "Just us 3. That's it. No one else." "When did you cross the border?" the leader snapped. "Border?" the burly man beside me stammered. "We didn't cross any border." "Then why were you running through the aqua forest?" the leader growled. "I am the Shizhong of the Aqua Tree Unit. Yesterday, I received word that northern spies had infiltrated our territory. Was it you?" The big man and the boy looked confused by the title Shizhong, but they looked relieved. These weren't bandits, they were soldiers. I knew enough history to realize a Shizhong was a low-level officer, a commander of 10 men. Their uniforms were drab and ragged, nothing like the polished armor you see in TV dramas. No, we aren't spies," the big man cried out. "What even is a northern spy? We're being framed." The boy joined in, both of them wailing in protest. They didn't even understand the term the officer used. But I did. Connecting the border comment with the officer's phrasing, I realized northern spy meant exactly what it sounded like: enemy agents from a rival kingdom. "If we were spies," I said, my voice surprisingly steady, "we wouldn't be running blindly through the woods. We certainly wouldn't be screaming at the top of our lungs." The soldiers all turned to look at me. "Right? Exactly." The boy and the big man chimed in, clinging to my logic like a lifeline. The Shizhong blinked, momentarily silenced by my reasoning. He rubbed his chin. "Maybe you were running from pursuers," he countered. "If we were running that hard," I replied, "there would be someone behind us. We've been stopped here for a long time now. Where are the pursuers?" The spearman with the dark skin gave me a long, hard look. The Shizhong straightened his posture, his voice turning gruff. "Where is your place of registration? Your household origin?" I kept my mouth shut. I knew the general era we were in, but place names changed constantly throughout history. If I guessed wrong, I was dead. If I claimed to be a local, I'd have to provide a specific village. If I claimed to be from far away, they'd demand travel papers. The big man, desperate to clear his name, spoke up first. "I'm from Lingnan." It was a smart play. Lingnan was a remote, wild region in ancient times. He probably figured it was too far away for them to verify. The handsome boy looked like he wanted to cry. He was the protagonist type, but he was failing miserably. Suddenly, he puffed out his chest, trying to summon some courage. I am from the Great British Empire. Across the sea." I looked at him, stunned. "You really have the guts to make that up?" I thought. The big man's eyes flickered. He was probably wondering if he should have claimed to be from overseas too. It was harder to disprove. The Shizhong frowned and turned his gaze to me. "And you?" "I am a Falong Run," I said calmly. The boy looked lost, and the big man thought I was copying the foreigner excuse. But Falong Rin didn't mean I was from a distant land. In this era, it was a specific term for a person without a household registration, a wanderer who didn't belong to any county. The Shizhong let out a cold, mocking laugh. He pointed at the big man and the boy, one from Lingnan and one from some empire across the sea. "Fine. Show me your guasuo." My heart sank. A guasuo was the ancient version of a passport or ID card. Every traveler, whether a peasant or a foreign merchant, had to carry one issued by the government. The big man and the boy stared blankly. They had no idea what a guasuo even was. If he had asked for an ID card, they might have lied and said they lost it, but they were like ducks listening to thunder, completely clueless. "I knew you were full of it," the Shizhong sneered. "That's fine. We'll break you slowly." He glanced at me. "As for the wanderer, he's not my problem. Send him to Lingxi. If he's lucky, He'll get a bowl of bean porridge. I didn't know where Linksy was, but I wanted to get away from these soldiers as fast as possible. Wait, the big man shouted. I'm a wanderer too. A Fulangren. Me too, the boy added. We all are. Shut up, the Shizhong barked. You're both liars. You're either spies, runaway slaves, or bandits. Take the real wanderer away. The big man panicked. He's a fake, he yelled, pointing at me. My stomach dropped. What are you talking about? The Shizhong asked, annoyed. If I'm not real, then he isn't either, the big man screamed, looking at the boy for support. We're together. We've always been together. The boy hesitated for a second, then nodded firmly. Yes. Together. We've been together the whole time. I looked at the boy, but he turned his head away, unable to meet my eyes. I took a deep breath, trying to stay calm. I am not with them, I said. He is. He is, they both shouted. In that moment, I felt like a crab in a bucket. Every time I managed to start climbing out, the others reached up and dragged me back down into the mess. The Shizhong rubbed his temples, looking irritated. A soldier named Woozy leaned in and whispered something in his ear. The Shizhong's eyes traveled over the three of us, and a slow, greasy smile spread across his face. Since we can't clear this up, I'll just keep all of you, he said. Life in my hands won't be easy. But you three, you have decent skin. Especially this one. He looked the handsome boy up and down. Pretty as a little lady. Then he turned his gaze to me. This one isn't bad either. What are you going to do? The boy asked, his voice trembling with a new kind of fear. The Shizhong laughed. You'll find out soon enough. Our captain has a specific taste. You're lucky, boys. My blood turned to ice. I felt my scalp go numb. I had forgotten that in this era, certain preferences were common among the military elite. We weren't being arrested. We were being collected as toys. The soldiers burst into laughter. The three of us stood there, faces pale as ghosts. Seize them, the Shizhong ordered, waving his hand. Send the two pretty ones to the captain. Give the sturdy one to the scribe. As the soldiers relaxed their bows and moved in, laughing, the big man suddenly bolted. He sprinted toward the west, screaming at the top of his lungs. Run east. Quick. Hide the money. It was a calculated move. By telling us to run east, he hoped to split the soldiers up. By mentioning money, he was trying to make us the more valuable targets so they would let him go. It was a good plan on paper. But the boy was so paralyzed with fear, he couldn't even tell which way was east. I didn't follow the big man. I didn't move at all. It wasn't that I didn't want to run, but I was looking at 9 soldiers armed with bows. The odds of escaping were 0. The big man had underestimated their reflexes. He only made it a few steps before an arrow thudded into the dirt right in front of his feet. He froze, his hands flying up in a reflex of pure terror. The handsome boy was paralyzed too. Run? Go on, keep running, the Shizhong sneered. This is mulberry wood. I could pick you off like a rabbit from 20 paces away. He spat on the ground, his eyes cold. 2 little brats trying to bolt? I'll show you what happens to runners. He waved a hand, and 4 soldiers swarmed forward. They grabbed the big man and the boy, pinning their arms behind their backs with brutal force. I can make salt, the big man screamed, his voice cracking. High-quality salt. I can. He never finished the sentence. A soldier slammed a heavy knife hilt into his stomach. The man doubled over, gasping for air, his face turning purple. While he was screaming about salt, the handsome boy started shouting too. The wind is fierce, the sky is high, the apes howl in grief. Above the clear sands of the islet, white birds fly back. It was a famous poem, but it didn't save him. He met the same fate as the big man. A heavy hilt smashed into his mouth, cutting his lips instantly. Blood coated his teeth. He looked utterly bewildered. I could see the thought behind his eyes. I'm the main character. Why is this happening to me? What are they yelling about? The Shizhong asked, looking confused. The dark-faced soldier beside him shrugged. One says he sells salt. The other is reciting lyrics, I think. It was a tragic comedy. My fellow travelers were throwing out their cheat codes, but they were performing for a blind audience. In this era, people only knew coarse yellow or black salt. The concept of refined salt didn't even exist yet. To these soldiers, it was just nonsense. As for the poetry, it was a masterpiece from the future, but these men were illiterate grunts. They couldn't hear the beauty, they just heard noise. The Shizhong pointed a finger at me. Grab that one too. He's being quiet. The captain will definitely like him. Two soldiers marched toward me, reaching out with massive, calloused hands. My pulse hammered in my ears. I stepped back, my eyes wide, and I funneled every bit of fear and desperation into my lungs. I am the prince of the Langyawang family. I warned. Touch me, and your entire clans will be slaughtered. The sound was like a thunderclap. It was the roar of a trapped beast. The soldiers actually flinched, stopping in their tracks. The word I used, Zuji, meant the total extermination of a bloodline. It was a social nuclear bomb. Silence fell over the clearing. Everyone stared at me. I had calculated this lie carefully. Based on their speech and the mention of northern spies, I guessed we were in the northern and southern dynasties. It was an era of strict social hierarchy. If you were a commoner, you were dirt. If you were from a high-ranking noble family, you were a god. The Langyawang family was the most powerful clan in the south. They had held power for centuries. If I was going to lie, I had to go big. Of course, it was a massive gamble. If I got the timing wrong, or if they asked for my family register, I was dead. But I had to protect myself. I wasn't going to let these men turn me into a toy. The Shizhong stared at me for a long beat. Then, he burst out laughing. He laughed so hard, he nearly doubled over. The other soldiers joined in, hooting and pointing at me like I was the funniest thing they'd ever seen. You? The Shizhong wheezed, pointing at my rags. You actually have the guts to claim that? Look at you. You're a beggar. You wouldn't be a Wong in 8 lifetimes. I actually felt a wave of relief. They knew the name. That confirmed my theory about the era. But looking down at myself, I saw the problem. I was wearing tattered clothes tied with a hemp rope. Even a servant in the Wong household would look like a king next to me. If I tried to explain myself like a panicked kid, I was finished. I had to stay in character. I let out a cold, arrogant sneer. I'm poor, I asked, my voice dripping with disdain. A single coral tree from my family's garden could buy all of your lives 10 times over. You think these rags define me? I looked at my clothes as if they were a disgusting skin I was forced to wear. I changed into these to escape bandits. You judge a man by his coat. No wonder you're stuck in the dirt with no eyes to see the truth. I shook my head and sighed, looking bored. I don't have time for this crap, the Shizhong snapped, his face hardening. Lao San, Ding Jiao, grab him. Slap him twice to shut that mouth. The two soldiers moved in again. I didn't flinch. I just stood there, cold and steady. Go ahead, I said quietly. If you want your families wiped out for 3 generations, take another step. The two soldiers hesitated. My confidence was unnerving them. Are you idiots? The Shizhong barked. You actually believe him? Even if he were a Wong, he couldn't kill your whole families. He's a peasant faking it. It's obvious. I threw my head back and laughed. I laughed louder than he had. It was a bluff, and deep down, I knew I had pushed the extermination threat too far, but I couldn't back down now. I had to make them doubt themselves. My life depended on it. I knew I had pushed the extermination threat too far, but I couldn't back down. If I had more time, I would have crafted a more believable lie. In the heat of the moment, I just had to make this one stick. Have you never heard of the crime of ENI? I asked, my voice dripping with pity as I looked at the Shizhong. But then again, you're just a lowly squad leader. What would you know about the law? I had to keep the pressure on. While he wavered, I stepped forward, my eyes flashing with feigned rage. Those who commit ENI, those who strike their superiors, are executed. I barked. Their families are slaughtered. Their property is seized. My family has been elite for generations. My uncle serves as a cavalier attendant in the capital. If anything happens to me, the emperor himself will hear of it. Do you think I'm joking about wiping out your clans? I tucked my hands behind my back to hide the fact that they were shaking. My fingertips were ice cold. To sell a lie, you need details. A lie without details is just a house of cards. I was gambling on 2 things, the fear of the ENI crime and the prestige of my fake uncle's rank. I didn't actually know if the crime of ENI existed in this specific era, but I knew it existed in the Han and Tang dynasties. History usually rhymes. I bet everything on the fact that these grunts wouldn't know the specific legal codes. As for the cavalier attendant rank, it was a position reserved only for the highest nobility, men who stood close to the emperor. If a real scholar had been there, he would have called my bluff in a second. He would have known that even if I were a noble, their actions didn't technically qualify as ENI. But these soldiers? To them, ENI was a terrifying word they associated with treason. And a high-ranking uncle in the capital? That was a god-tier threat. To them, their own commander was a nobody compared to a man like that. The atmosphere shifted. I wasn't a ragged kid anymore. I was a dangerous aristocrat in disguise. The two soldiers who had tried to grab me scrambled back. Even the Shizhong stopped breathing for a second, his mind racing. I didn't give him time to think. Silence is where lies go to die. I casually flicked some dust off my tattered sleeve, trying to look like a lord who found his clothes beneath him. My name is Wang Yang, courtesy name Jian, I said smoothly. It comes from the Book of Songs. The gentleman grows old with his lady, his face clear and bright. If I hadn't run into bandits, I would have met my uncle's escort by now. I wouldn't be stuck in this God's forsaken hole. Reciting poetry wasn't just for show. In this era, knowledge was a monopoly. Only the elite could afford books or tutors. By quoting the classics, I was showing them my ID card. But the real kicker was my last sentence. I was telling them that people were already looking for me. If they killed me, they'd have to answer to a rescue party. The soldiers looked at me with a mix of awe and terror. Even the handsome boy next to me looked annoyed, probably wondering why my poetry worked when his didn't. The Shizhong swallowed hard. His voice was much softer now. Do you have any documents to prove who you are? I narrowed my eyes. Are you deaf? I told you, bandits took everything. My carriage, my clothes, my papers. All gone. But without proof. He stammered. The official registries are my proof. I snapped. Go ahead and check them. If you think a squad leader has the right to audit the Wang family genealogy, be my guest. I saw him hesitate, so I let out a long, bored yawn. Fine. I won't make it hard for you. I'll give you a different kind of proof. I pointed at a soldier named Ding Jiu. You, go get me a tree branch. Ding Jiu looked at the Shizhong, but a big, dark-skinned soldier beat him to it. He hurried over, grabbed a few branches, and approached me with his head bowed. He held them out with both hands, showing more respect than he probably showed his own mother. I almost said thank you out of habit, but I caught myself. A noble wouldn't thank a peasant for a stick. I snatched the branch and started drawing in the dirt. Everyone leaned in. At first, they thought I was writing words, but then they saw the intricate, swirling patterns and tiny symbols I was carving into the earth. It was complex, jagged, and looked ancient. This, the Shizhong whispered, his eyes wide. Is this a spell? I tossed the branch aside and stood up straight. Look closely, I said. This is the authentic talisman of light from the way of the celestial masters. The Langyawang family has always followed the way of the celestial masters, I said, my voice dripping with cold authority. Surely, even you know that. I watched their faces. In truth, I was gambling. Back in my own time, I had studied the history of the southern dynasties. I knew that the great scholar Chen Inca had proven the Wang family's devotion to this specific Taoist sect. These soldiers probably didn't know the history, but they knew that the high nobility were obsessed with gods and spirits. The symbol I had drawn was real. It was a talisman of light, copied from ancient scrolls held in the National Library of France in my world. To these men, the intricate, swirling lines didn't look like a drawing. They looked like power. The Shizhong stared at the dirt, his breath hitching. I could see the gears turning in his head. My clothes were rags, but my arrogance was flawless. My knowledge was too specific to be a lie. He was starting to believe me. I felt a surge of relief. I was almost clear. I'm from the Langyawang family too, a voice suddenly shrieked. Me too. We're all from the same family, another one yelled. I froze. I wanted to scream. 1,000 insults flashed through my mind. It was the big man and the handsome boy. They saw me winning and decided to jump on the lifeboat. It was the stupidest thing they could have done. One noble traveler in the woods was a miracle. 3 of us appearing out of nowhere was a goddamn circus. The Shizhong's eyes snapped toward them, then back to me. The suspicion returned, sharper than before. 3 of them, he muttered. All Wangs. I had to act fast. If I acknowledged them as family, we'd be separated and interrogated. One wrong detail from those idiots, and we'd all be executed. If I ignored them, they'd realize I was leaving them to die, and they'd expose me out of spite. I didn't hesitate. I walked straight toward them. Brother, tell them. Tell them who we are, the boy cried out, thinking I was coming to save him. He called me brother, a term that wouldn't even be used this way for another few centuries. These idiots didn't even know the language of the era they were in. I stumbled slightly as I walked, making it look like I tripped. As I bent down to adjust my shoe, I reached out and squeezed the hem of my trousers. They were still damp with the vinegar I'd used earlier. I managed to soak my fingers in the pungent liquid. I stood up and reached the boy first. Brother, hurry and slap. I swung my right hand with everything I had. The sound echoed through the clearing. I didn't stop. I stepped over to the big man. He saw the look in my eyes and tried to recoil, but the soldiers held him tight. You little brat, don't you dare, slap. I hit him so hard my own palm stung. I used my left hand to grip their arms as I struck, secretly rubbing the vinegar-soaked scent onto their skin. You filthy spies. I roared, pointing a trembling finger at them. You cross the border, sneak into our lands, and then have the gall to claim the name of the Langyawang family? The Shizhong's jaw dropped. The soldiers stood frozen. He's a fake, the boy screamed, his cheeks swelling. He's lying. He's not a noble. He's a fraud, the big man bellowed, thrashing against his captors. He's not even from this world. Don't believe him. I didn't flinch. I had planned this. By hitting them, I had accomplished 4 things. First, I planted a scent on them that I would use later. Second, the physical shock bought me time. Third, I made them so angry they lost all logic. And fourth, the most important part, I created a public feud. Now, any accusation they made against me looked like petty revenge for the slap. Their words carried no weight. Spies, the Shizhong asked, stepping forward. You called them spies? I narrowed my eyes at him, looking like I was evaluating his intelligence. You really don't know? Look at them. Look at their behavior. He's lying, the big man roared. He's the one lying. You're all idiots if you believe him. Shut them up, I said coldly. The Shizhong was more interested in the spy lead than their screaming. He nodded to his men. A soldier stepped forward and slammed the pommel of his sword into the big man's stomach. Then he did the same to the boy. The boy doubled over, gasping for air, unable to speak. The big man slumped, his face twisted in pure hatred, his voice dropping to a ragged whisper. Fake, he's a fake. I didn't even look at him. I had made my move. Now, I had to finish the game. I looked at the Shizhong, my expression arrogant and unbothered. By rights, a man of your rank has no business knowing about this, I said, my voice dripping with feigned authority. But since I have a use for you, I suppose there's no harm in telling you. You've heard that northern spies have crossed the border into Luoyang, haven't you? Do you know how they got in? The Shizhong looked confused. I heard they sneaked across. I let out a cold, mocking laugh. They didn't just sneak in. They had help waiting for them. The Shizhong's eyes widened. You mean there's a mole? I scanned the group of soldiers, my gaze sharp and piercing. Of course. And they are right here in the army. The soldiers froze, looking at each other with sudden suspicion. The Shizhong was completely lost. But, how do you know this, young master? Where did this information come from? I shook my head and gave him a pitying smile. This matter is too big for someone like you to handle. My ambush on the road was likely connected to this. If you're not afraid of being silenced forever once the truth comes out, I can tell you everything right now. The color drained from their faces. The Shizhong waved his hands frantically. No, please, young master, don't say another word. We're just soldiers. We don't understand these high-level affairs. I nodded, acting as if I were doing him a massive favor. After the ambush, I ran into these for while I was escaping. I traveled with them for a while. During the night, I overheard them speaking in the Hu language. The Shizhong gasped. You even understand the language of the northern barbarians? Just SOSO, I replied casually. The soldiers stared at me, blank-faced. I waved my hand dismissively, looking bored. In truth, I didn't know a word of the ancient northern dialects. But I knew this was the Southern Dynasty's era, and the enemies to the north were the Hu tribes. I gambled that these low-level grunts wouldn't know a foreign tongue. Even if one of them did, I could easily talk my way out of it. I had spoken that English phrase just to dazzle them and add an air of mystery. By saying it quickly and with total confidence, I left them with the impression that I was fluent in a strange, elite language. It worked. Their fear of me grew. That was English, the handsome boy screamed, desperate now. He's a fraud. He's lying. I can speak it too. Fine. Thank you. And you? See, it's English. The big man thrashed against the soldiers holding him. This little brat isn't from the Langyawang family. He's a liar. We came here together. The soldiers looked back and forth, doubt flickering in their eyes again. I knew I had to hammer the final nail into their coffins. You're lucky, I said to the Shizhong. Without even knowing it, you've earned a massive military credit. These two, and the two you already killed, are all northern spies. If you don't believe me, cut the right sleeves off their robes. There is a secret mark hidden there. You'll see it for yourselves. I pointed to a specific spot on the upper arm. The Shizhong didn't hesitate. He ordered his men to use their daggers to slice the fabric from the prisoner's sleeves. He flipped the cloth over, frowning. There's nothing here, he muttered. I looked at him with pure contempt. If it were that easy to see, it wouldn't be a secret mark, would it? I tilted my head back, radiating power. Someone, build a fire. The soldiers scrambled to gather wood and sparked a small blaze. I took the pieces of cloth and held them over the flames, moving them back and forth. The big man and the boy never stopped cursing me, screaming that I was the real fake. There, I said, handing the cloth back to the Shizhong. Look. The soldiers crowded around. On the fabric that had been blank moments ago, a small, brownish circle had clearly emerged. This was the real reason I had slapped them earlier. While my hands were wet with the vinegar I'd secretly prepared, I had marked their sleeves during the struggle. The vinegar was faint and evaporated quickly, making it invisible to the naked eye. But once heated, the acid concentrated and scorched the fabric before the rest of the cloth could burn. To me, it was basic science. To these soldiers, it was a miracle of high-stakes espionage. They were now utterly convinced I was a high-ranking noble. Who else would know such secrets? The prisoners realized they were losing. They started screaming wilder accusations, that I was a murderer, that I was planning a rebellion, anything to get the soldiers to turn on me. But their desperation only made them look more like lying spies trying to save their skins. What does this symbol mean, young master? The Shizhong asked breathlessly. It represents the sun. I lied, drawing on bits of history I remembered. The northern tribes have worshipped the sun and moon since ancient times. Haven't you read the records? They bow to the rising sun and the full moon. The Shizhong shook his head. He hadn't read a thing in his life. Do you have any idea how many spies cross the border every year? I continued, my voice low and serious. They have moles everywhere, even in the army. That's why I didn't expose them the moment I saw you. I had to be sure you weren't one of them. I had addressed the one hole in my story, why I hadn't spoken up sooner, by making it look like I was testing their loyalty. The Shizhong's last bit of doubt vanished. The spies travel in groups, I added. They use these marks to identify each other. Usually, one has the mark to lead, and the others follow. This is a state secret. If you value your life, you won't repeat it. I wouldn't dare, the Shizhong stammered, bowing low. This humble servant would never speak of it. It was the first time he had called himself a humble servant in my presence. I had won. He's a killer. He's a fake. He's trying to overthrow the throne, the big man howled, sounding completely hysterical now. I looked at the two of them. They wanted me dead. If I let them live, they would eventually find a way to expose me. I had to be ruthless. What should we do with them? I asked the Shizhong. We'll take them back for interrogation, he replied. I shook my head. Too much trouble. Then, what does the young master suggest? I didn't say a word. I simply looked over at the cold bodies of the two travelers they had already killed. The Shizhong followed my gaze and turned pale. That might be against regulations, he whispered. If they are spies, we might get something out of them if we bring them back alive. I gave him a thin, dangerous smile. Regulations? When we first met, you shot two men without asking a single question. You were planning to hand the rest of us over to your captain for entertainment. What regulations were you following then? The Shizhong looked embarrassed, shifting his weight. Well, it was dark, and they were moving through the woods at night. I waved my hand dismissively at the Shizhong. I don't care about your military regulations, I said, my voice cold. I'm just reminding you that keeping these two alive isn't a good idea. They don't know what should be said and what shouldn't. The big man erupted in a fury. You're the one who deserves a miserable death. You're plotting to kill us. Was all that education for nothing? He turned to the soldiers, screaming, Don't believe him. He's not from the Langyawang family. You idiots are being played. The handsome boy joined in, his voice cracking with desperation. They were both hysterical now, hurling insults that grew viler by the second. I leaned in and whispered to the Shizhong, see? They're diehards. If you take them back, they'll never admit to being spies. They'll just spout nonsense in their depositions. You won't get any credit. You'll get blamed for bringing back trouble. Kill them now, and you've eliminated 4 northern spies. Take them back, and you're just escorting 2 headaches. The Shizhong hesitated, his brow furrowed. But there's so little evidence. Without a confession, all I have is that Sun's secret stone thing. You don't need the stone, I said, offering him a way out. I will testify for you. The word of a member of the Langyawang family is the ultimate evidence. I'll guarantee their identity as spies. You and your men kill them, and it's a major achievement for you. That was exactly what the Shizhong wanted to hear. He immediately bowed, cupping his hands. By your command. He turned to his men. Lao San Dingjiao, by order of young Master Wang, execute these 2 spies. He intentionally used my order to shift the responsibility, but I didn't care. These 2 had to go. The big man was ruthless and had already caused Su Bian's death. The boy was less evil, but he had tried to expose my identity twice. If I showed mercy now, I'd just be the farmer in the fable, warming a frozen snake only to be bitten. Lao San and Dingjiao drew their blades and stepped toward them. The boy's legs turned to jelly. He fell to his knees, sobbing. Master Wang, Brother Wang, I was wrong. Give me a chance, I'll be your assistant. I don't want to die. I just transmigrated. I'm the main character. The big man was tougher. He glared at the soldiers. He's the spy. He's the biggest northern spy of all. Report him to your general, and you'll be rewarded. As the cold steel touched his neck, the big man let out one final roar at me. You little brat. You've broken the law. Murder. Incitement. You'll never go back. You'll. The blade slid across their throats. The cursing stopped instantly. I turned my back on the scene. My limbs felt cold and numb, as if all the strength had been drained from my body. It was the first time I had taken a life. I didn't regret it. Living in the ancient world was never going to be easy, but the weight of it hit me hard. Young Master Wang, the Shizhong said, his voice now incredibly respectful. Please come with us to meet Captain Shui. I kept my back turned, my voice dripping with feigned arrogance. Meet him? A lowly captain? He isn't worth my time. Go back and tell him I'm here. Let him come to me. I wasn't just acting. My legs were actually shaking, and I was afraid I'd collapse if I tried to walk. More importantly, I didn't want to meet any captain. I could fool these soldiers, but a seasoned officer might see through me. I hoped they would all leave so I could run. The Shizhong bowed even lower. Yes, yes, I will go at once. I felt a surge of relief as they prepared to move out. But then, the Shizhong paused and looked back. In this wilderness, how can the young master be without protection? Lao San, Dingjiao, you stay and serve the young master. A burly soldier with curly hair stepped forward. Shizhong, those 4 bodies need to be beheaded and collected. Lao San and Dingjiao can't protect the master while doing that. Let me stay too. I cursed inwardly. The Shizhong nodded to the burly man and whispered something I couldn't hear, likely a warning not to let me escape. As the Shizhong led the rest of the squad away, a thin soldier named Xiao Chan hurried to keep pace. Boss, this feels risky. What if those 2 were telling the truth? The Shizhong slowed down. Let me ask you, is it better for us if they were spies, or if they weren't? Spies, obviously, Xiao Chan replied. Killing 4 spies means credit and reward money. Then why are you asking? The Shizhong snapped. We just report it. Whether he's real or a fake is for Captain Shui to decide. It's got nothing to do with us. Now, everyone listen up. Keep your mouth shut. If you talk too much, you'll ruin yourselves and your brothers. Back at the clearing, the moon was rising. The burly soldier found a flat rock and hauled it over to me, wiping it clean with his sleeve. Please, young master, sit and rest. I'll get you some water. Dingjiao came running with a leather canteen, a huge grin on his face. Water's here. Fresh mountain spring water, young master. Please, quench your thirst. I took the water, but my mind was racing. Pretending to be a Wang was a temporary fix. I was about to face a captain, and I didn't even know what dynasty I was in. I knew I was in the southern dynasties, the era of the five kingdoms, Jin, Song, Qi, Liang, and Chun. I hoped it was the Jin dynasty. I definitely didn't want it to be the Chun dynasty, because that ended in a bloodbath when the Sui invaded. I needed to figure out the era before the captain arrived, so I could make my lies believable. But how? I couldn't just ask. A noble wouldn't forget the name of his own country. I sat on the rock, took a sip of water, and tried to sound casual. How long have you two been in the army? 5 years for me, Dingzhou said quickly. 8 years, sir, the burly man added. Veterans, then, I remarked. Why did you join? They both stared at me with strange, confused expressions. I realized instantly I had made a mistake. In this era, soldiers were born into it. It was a hereditary system, the soldier households. You didn't choose to join. You were forced into it by birth, crime, or debt. My modern question had just sounded incredibly stupid. The conditions in the army were worse than I imagined. To keep soldiers from deserting, the government ruled them with an iron fist, crushing their social status until they were lower than common peasants. These two men weren't here by choice. They were soldier households. Their fathers were soldiers, and their grandfathers before them. It was common knowledge, which explained why they looked at me like I was an idiot when I asked why they joined. I realized my blunder and tried to smooth it over with a calm, arrogant tone. So you are being Jiazi, hereditary soldiers, not by being drafted from the civilian ranks. I was trying to sound academic, recalling a famous poem about refined scholars and no ignorant commoners, or Bai Ding. In this era, Bai Ding meant free men who were drafted for specific campaigns but kept their freedom. I thought I was being clever, but I missed the mark completely. The term Bing Jiazi was actually a slur. It was like calling someone a military brat, or worse. It was one thing for them to know they were bottom-tier soldiers, but having a noble throw it in their faces was a different story. Ding Zhou's face turned bright red, his eyes flashing with hidden resentment. The big man, Lao San, just gave a bitter smile. The young master is right, Lao San said quietly. We aren't lucky enough to be free men. The atmosphere turned cold. I knew I'd stepped in it, but I couldn't stop now. I needed information. I had to know what year it was, or I was a dead man walking. Can you read? I asked, trying to keep the conversation going. Ding Zhou's jaw tightened. He looked like he wanted to spit. To him, I was just a pampered brat mocking his illiteracy. No, he barked. Lao San, ever the diplomat, didn't get angry. He gave me a fawning smile. I know a few characters, sir. I felt a surge of relief. What's your name? It's rare for someone in your position to be literate. My name is Lao San, he said, looking a bit embarrassed. I taught myself a few words so I could teach my little daughter. I don't know much. I looked at him, tall, dark, and rugged. His name suited him. All right, Lao San. Let me test you. Do you know the meaning of our current era name? This was it. The big question. Lao San looked distressed. The era name is decided by the great lords in the capital. How could a man like me understand such things? It's fine, I urged. Just tell me what you think it means. He hesitated, then found his courage. I think it means forever bright. Forever bright. Yongming. My heart skipped a beat. Yongming? I searched my memory. That was the era name for the southern Qi dynasty. Of the 5 southern dynasties, this was the one I knew the least about. It was the shortest, the most chaotic, and the most violent. I couldn't remember the emperors, the generals, or the major battles. All I knew was that it ended in a bloodbath before being replaced by the Liang dynasty. The only reason I even recognized the name, Yongming, was because of a specific style of poetry from my history books. That was useless to me now. I would have traded all my literary knowledge for a simple list of the current emperor's family tree. Young Master Wang. Lao San's voice pulled me back to reality. What does Yongming actually mean? Ding Zhou yawned, clearly bored by the academic talk. To him, it was just 2 words. But I saw an opportunity to solidify my disguise. If I was a Wang of Langia, I had to sound like a genius. I cleared my throat and shifted into scholar mode, quoting ancient texts and weaving a complex explanation about virtue, light, and the eternal prosperity of the state. I almost slipped up and called it Southern Qi, but caught myself just in time. To the people living here, it was just Qi, the legitimate center of the world. I rattled off a string of high-level philosophy, sounding every bit the arrogant aristocrat. When I finished, Lao San's eyes were wide with genuine awe. He bowed deeply, his forehead nearly touching the dirt. "Your knowledge is vast, young master," he whispered. "You have truly opened my eyes." Even Ding Jiao, who had been annoyed moments ago, looked impressed. My lie was holding, but the real test was yet to come. I was still a prisoner, and the captain was waiting. Lao San didn't miss the chance to suck up to me. He dropped to his knees, clasping his hands in a respectful salute. "Young master, you are incredible. Your stomach is full of knowledge. Every word you speak sounds like a masterpiece." Before I could respond, the sound of hurried footsteps echoed through the night. About 20 men were approaching fast. Torches flickered in the darkness, casting long, dancing shadows across the dirt. My heart skipped a beat. This was it. Leading the group was a big man with a thick beard. He wasn't wearing the heavy armor you see in period dramas. Instead, he wore a wide-sleeved Western-style robe with a flared hem and a small crown, a penguin's, on his head. To a modern eye, the outfit looked a bit ridiculous, like he couldn't decide if he was a soldier or a scholar. But in the northern and southern dynasties, this was standard gear for military officers. The man walked toward me, his eyes scanning me from head to toe. I noticed something immediately. There was no respect in his gaze. He looked like he was coming to interrogate a prisoner, not greet a noble. I didn't wait for him to speak. As he stepped into range, I grabbed my water skin and hurled it straight at his face. It caught him completely off guard. He jerked back, but the water skin burst against his chest, drenching his robes. The soldiers stood frozen in shock. I didn't give them a second to breathe. I scrambled to my feet and started screaming at him before he could utter a word. "What kind of commander are you?" I roared, pointing a finger at his wet chest. "The emperor issued a decree long ago. The border defenses are supposed to be vigilant. Northern spies have been lurking in your jurisdiction for 2 days, and you had no idea? Do you treat the emperor's words like wind blowing past your ears?" The man was fuming, his face turning red as he wiped water from his eyes. He looked ready to kill me. But when he heard the words, "Emperor's decree," he visibly flinched. A low-level officer like him had probably never even seen a royal edict, let alone heard one quoted. The accusation of ignoring the emperor was a death sentence he couldn't afford. He dropped to one knee instantly. I wouldn't dare. This lowly servant was negligent. The emperor's decree was, of course, a total lie. I'd made it up on the spot to knock him off balance. I needed to seize the initiative before he could start asking questions I couldn't answer. I let out a cold snort. "You're lucky. If your men hadn't killed that spy and rescued me, you wouldn't have enough lives to pay for this failure. But since the spy is dead, I won't pursue the matter further." "Thank you for your mercy, young master," the man stammered. He looked relieved, but I could see a flicker of confusion in his eyes. He was starting to wonder how a prisoner ended up lecturing him. I stepped closer, looming over him. "I have another question. You knew I was here, so why are you so late? And where is my horse? Do you expect me to walk? Do you have no respect for the Wang family of Langya?" In this era, a duizu, a squad leader, commanded anywhere from 30 to 50 men. They weren't even ranked officials. They were the bottom of the military food chain. To a powerful aristocratic clan, a man like Captain Shui was nothing more than a shrimp in a vast ocean. Any noble could crush him without breaking a sweat. "I wouldn't dare," Captain Shui cried out, his voice trembling. "It's just, there are no horses in this camp. I am truly powerless." I already knew that. Horses were rare in the south, and infantry made up the bulk of the army. I was just looking for a reason to keep him suppressed. Besides, I didn't even know how to ride a horse. If he had actually brought one, I would have been in trouble. "What is your name?" I asked coldly. "And when did you become a squad leader?" "My name is Xueling," he replied quickly. "I was appointed in the 4th month of the 6th year of Yongming. And do you know how long you've held this post?" "Yes, in about 10 days, it will be exactly 2 years. Finally, I had what I needed. If he'd been in the role for 2 years since the 6th year of Yongming, then the current date was the 4th month of the 8th year of Yongming. 2 years, I repeated, my voice dripping with disdain. "If my cousin were here instead of me, he would have found a reason to execute you already. You wouldn't even know how you died." Xueling's back went cold. He bowed his head, muttering apologies. He had lived his whole life without ever meeting a high-ranking noble, and in his mind, the Wang family really was that terrifying. To them, his life was probably worth less than grass. Fine, I said, waving a hand dismissively. Your men saved me, and I am not ungrateful. Get up. Find me a place to rest. Xueling looked like he'd been granted a royal pardon. He scrambled up and led the way back to the camp. But as we walked, I could tell he was thinking. He had come here to interrogate me, yet he hadn't asked a single question. Instead, I had been the one questioning him. Still, my performance was convincing. He probably figured that even if he tried to fake an imperial decree, he couldn't have sounded that natural. Plus, a fake would try to run away. I was walking straight into his camp with my head held high. I didn't actually want to go to the camp. I wanted to tell him to get lost so I could escape. But that would have been suspicious. To keep the lie alive, I had to play the part of the arrogant noble who expected to be served. Later that night, the camp was quiet. Inside a tent, Xueling sat behind a rickety wooden desk with a man named Secretary Wang, the camp's only literate person. The soldier who had first captured me stood before them, reporting what I'd said earlier. Wait, say that again, Secretary Wang said, leaning forward. What did he say his second uncle's title was? He said, Sanchi Changshi, the soldier recalled tentatively. Secretary Wang's brow furrowed. Are you sure? The soldier nodded, his confidence growing. Yes, that was it. Secretary Wang went quiet, his eyes narrowing. Then he looked at the soldier. Get out. Now. Once the soldier was gone, Xueling turned to the secretary, his face pale. What is it? What did you find out? Secretary Wang looked him dead in the eye. The man is an imposter. Xueling jumped out of his chair, his eyes wide. Are you serious? I don't joke about these things, the secretary hissed. I just came back from the provincial capital. The current Sanchi Changshi is General Xiao Rue. He isn't a Wang from Langya. He's a member of the imperial Xiao family. Xueling let out a roar of rage and kicked the desk over, sending it crashing to the floor. Meanwhile, in another tent, I was oblivious to the disaster. Steam rose from a wooden tub, filling the space with warmth. I had just finished bathing. I stood there, arms outstretched, as the big man helped me into clean robes and Ding Jiao began to comb my long hair. I wasn't doing this because I wanted to be pampered. I had to maintain my noble persona. More importantly, I had no idea how to put on these ancient clothes or tie up my hair. I'd never had hair this long in my life. Everything about this world was a puzzle, and one wrong move was about to bring the whole charade crashing down. The way clothes were worn in this era was completely different from anything I knew. I changed into a set of new garments provided by Captain Xue. It was a simple outfit, a blue cloth tunic on top and black trousers below. In this day and age, it wasn't exactly high fashion, and the fit was all wrong for my frame. Still, it was a massive upgrade from the scratchy hemp rags I had been wearing. Ow! I winced as a sharp pain shot through the back of my head. Easy there. Yes. My apologies, young master. I'll be careful, Ding Jiao stammered. His thick, clumsy fingers were fumbling with my hair. The entire process was agonizing for both of us. There was nothing comfortable about having a soldier try to style your hair like a nobleman. Oof! I felt a sudden squeeze around my middle. The big man had pulled my belt so tight I could barely breathe. Is something wrong, young master? He asked, completely oblivious. I sighed inwardly. Usually, when people transmigrate, they get beautiful maidens to wait on them. Here I was, stuck with two clumsy brutes who barely knew their left from their right. I was just about to kick them both out when a voice boomed from outside the tent. Young Master Wang, our captain requests your presence. It was the squad leader, his voice loud and formal. I didn't let my nerves show. I gathered the big man and Ding Jiao, and with the squad leader leading the way, I strutted toward Captain Xue's tent with as much arrogance as I could muster. The moment I stepped inside, the atmosphere shifted. The air felt heavy. Captain Xue wasn't hovering over me with his usual flattery anymore. He didn't even stand up to greet me. Beside him sat a man in his 40s, a stranger wearing clean, indigo-colored scholar's robes. He was staring at me with a mocking, half-smile that made my skin crawl. The squad leader's attitude had turned cold, too. My heart sank. Had they figured it out? Was my cover blown already? It is truly the honor of a lifetime to witness the elegance of a young master from the Langyawang family, the stranger said. His words were polite, but his tone was dripping with sarcasm. There wasn't a shred of respect in his voice. I was trembling inside, but I knew I couldn't show a hint of fear. I tucked my hands behind my back and walked slowly toward the scholar. I looked him right in the eye. "Stand up," I commanded. The scholar's smile froze. Ding Jiao, sensing the tension, scrambled to intervene. "Young master, this is our unit's secretary, Wang Luo." "A secretary?" I let out a sharp, mocking laugh, channeling every arrogant aristocrat I'd ever seen in movies. "You call him a secretary? I thought some high-ranking official had arrived." "A mere clerk? Ha ha ha. Even the high officials at the Imperial Secretariat don't dare remain seated in my presence. A tiny, insignificant ant like you thinks he's worthy of sitting while speaking to me?" Anger flashed across Wang Luo's face, but he suppressed it, maintaining his thin smile. "The young master certainly has a big mouth, but I suppose that makes sense. Since your uncle is the prestigious Sanchi Changshu, you naturally look down on everyone else." My stomach did a somersault. The hair on the back of my neck stood up. In an instant, I realized exactly where I had messed up. The Sanchi Changshu was a high-ranking position in the central government of the southern dynasties. There were very few people who held that title, and their names were well known in every provincial capital. I had been so desperate to scare the soldiers earlier that I picked a title far too prominent. If this secretary had just come from the city, he would know exactly who the real Sanchi Changshu was. Captain Shui couldn't hold back anymore. He slammed his hand on the desk, ready to order the guards to seize me. I didn't blink. I forced my face into a mask of pure rage. "What? Are you trying to mock my uncle for not being the Sanchi Changshu? My family has been imperial physicians for generations. We rise through merit and blood, not by counting how high a title is. So what if he isn't the Sanchi Changshu?" Wang Luo blinked, stunned. "What? Are you saying your uncle is not the Sanchi Changshu? Who told you he was?" I asked coolly. Wang Luo and Captain Shui both whipped their heads toward the squad leader. The poor man began to stammer. I remember. I'm sure," he said. I turned my gaze on the squad leader, making my eyes cold and threatening. "You remember what? I told you clearly that my second uncle is a Sanchi Shirlang. You exaggerated his rank for your own reasons. What exactly are you plotting?" In the complex bureaucracy of this era, there was usually only one Sanchi Changshu, maybe 2 or 4 at most. But the Sanchi Shirlang? There were dozens of them. I didn't know the specific history of this dynasty, but I knew the systems usually stayed the same. There was no way a small-time secretary like Wang Luo knew the names of every single Shirlang in the capital. Wang Luo turned on the squad leader, his voice trembling with fury. "Tell the truth, you idiot." The squad leader fell to his knees. I don't know. I might have misheard." Wang Luo looked at the big man and Ding Jiao, his eyes searching for any clue. "You too. What did the young master actually say?" Ding Jiao was straining his brain, trying to remember. But the big man didn't hesitate for a second. He knelt down, cupped his fists, and said firmly, "To the Great One, the young master said Sanchi Shirlang." I was shocked. Had the big man actually remembered correctly, or was he covering for me? Are you sure?" Wang Luo's voice was shaking now. The big man bumped his head against the floor. "Absolutely sure. I remember it clearly. I was even wondering what kind of official a Shirlang was. I didn't have time to wonder why he was lying for me. I just nodded. Finally, someone with a functioning brain. Ding Jiao, seeing me praise the big man, chimed in immediately. "I remember now too. It was Sanchi Shirlang." Wang Luo stood up so fast his chair nearly tipped over. He bowed deeply toward me, his face pale. "Please, forgive my ignorance. I did not know your true status. I have been incredibly rude. I beg for your grace." In this era, your name and your family's origin meant everything. This man's name was Wang Luo, but he was a Zhejiang Wang, a commoner branch. Compared to a Langyao Wang, he was nothing but dirt. "This is no place for you to sit," I said coldly. "Get out." Yes. Please, calm your anger, noble one." Wang Luo scrambled away, using his sleeve to frantically wipe the seat before gesturing for me to sit. I sat down as if I owned the place. Wang Luo leaned in cautiously. "May I ask, what is your honorable uncle's name?" I let out a cold snort. I gave him a look of pure disdain, the kind of look a dragon gives an insect. You think you're worthy of speaking my elder's name? Wang Luo was so terrified, he couldn't even lift his head. I was out of line. Terribly out of line. I turned my gaze to Captain Shui, who was still sitting there looking dazed. Captain Shui, you slammed the table earlier. What was that about? Shui didn't fully understand what had just happened, but seeing Wang Luo's total submission was enough for him. I was scolding the secretary. I was telling him not to be rude to you. I laughed coldly. I see you understand the rules. But it's still improper for us to be sitting together like this, don't you think? In the northern and southern dynasties, the gap between the nobility and commoners was like the gap between heaven and earth. It didn't matter if you were a high-ranking officer. If you weren't born into the right family, you weren't fit to sit at the same table as a true aristocrat. Wang Luo frantically signaled the captain. Captain Shui shot up from his seat so fast he nearly knocked the table over, standing there like a servant waiting for orders. I had won. For now, the lie was safe. I sat there in the silence I'd created, watching Wang Luo and Captain Shui scramble to accommodate me. Once they finally escorted me to a private room, the door shut, and I heard their hushed, frantic voices from the other side. What is wrong with you? Shui's voice exploded the moment they were out of my earshot. You told me he was definitely a fake. You said you'd bet your life on it. Wang Luo's voice was high-pitched and trembling. I thought his uncle was just some minor official. How was I supposed to know he meant a high attendant from the Langyuan clan? There's a branch of the royal family in that position right now. It has to be his uncle. If you want to die, don't drag me down with you. Shui hissed. Wait, Wang Luo stammered. What if he just heard the news somewhere? What if he's just a really good actor? But then again, those phrases he used. Advancing through the ranks and sitting among the ministers. A commoner couldn't just make those up. It's the language of the elite. I heard Shui tap the table impatiently. Are you sure or not? It's hard to say, Wang Luo muttered, sounding like he was rubbing his temples. But in this world, it's better to believe it than to risk it. If we offend the Langyuangs, we're dead men. Then what do we do? Shui asked, his voice dropping. Two choices, Wang Luo said. 1. We report this up the chain. 2. We verify it ourselves. Report it, Shui said instantly. He was clearly terrified of another confrontation with me. Think about it, Captain, Wang Luo countered. If we report it to Lord Huang, he'll come and take the boy personally. We won't get a single shred of credit. This is a Langyuan. People like us, even Lord Huang himself, would never get a chance to even see someone of that stature. We're nobodies. We'll die nobodies. But if we can cling to this golden thigh, I heard the shift in Shui's tone. Greed was winning. But would a noble like him even look at us? Normally? No. But he's in trouble. He needs us. We can't get him all the way to the capital, but we can get him to Jingzhou City. I just heard that a major figure from the Langyuan clan, a man named Wang Tai, moved there recently. He's a former high official, and his brother-in-law is the king of Jiangxia. If my math is right, this kid would have to call him uncle too. Shui gasped. What's a man like that doing in Jingzhou? Resting, probably. He's staying in the old city, ignoring everyone. Even the wealthy heirs of the Hudong Lu family were turned away at his door. But if we bring this boy to him, if we return a lost relative to the Wang family, our status will skyrocket. It's like leaping through the dragon's gate. We'll be set for life. Shui sounded excited now. Good. You scholars really do think differently. But what if the kid refuses to go? Then we know he's a fake, Wang Luo said coldly. If the fake monk is afraid to see the real Buddha, we kill him. A few minutes later, they entered my room. They were overly polite, explaining that a senior member of my family, Wang Tai, was currently in Jingzhou. They offered to escort me there at dawn to reunite with my kin. My heart skipped a beat. This was a trap. They weren't being kind. They were bringing me to a judge. If I met a real Langyuan, my cover would be blown in seconds. But I couldn't hesitate. If I showed even a hint of fear, I was dead. Very well, I said, my voice bored and steady. It's been a while since I've seen Uncle Tai. Their faces lit up. They were convinced. Wang Luo immediately brought out a brush, ink, and a wooden slip. Then, Noble One, please write your name card. We must present it when we arrive. In this era, a name card was your calling card. I had practiced calligraphy since I was a kid, years of copying Tang Dynasty scripts, and even winning a few small awards. I knew the format. I took the brush, felt the weight of it, and focused every ounce of my skill. I wrote, "Your kinsman, Wang Yang, bows in greeting. I ask after your health. Langya." The characters were sharp and firm. I looked at Wang Luo. He was staring at the slip, looking stunned. I felt a surge of pride. My years of practice had paid off. But then, a thought hit me. If I was a fake, my name wouldn't be in their family records. I needed a way out. I decided to play a trick. I added a small poem at the bottom, a modified version of a famous Tang poem that wouldn't be written for centuries. The road back home is long and vast. My sleeves are wet with tears of the past. Meeting here, no need to ask why. Just tell my kin I've survived the sky. It was a bit dramatic, but it gave me an excuse. If the real Wang Tai didn't recognize me, I could claim I was from a distant, obscure branch of the family, or that I was being metaphorical. Wang Luo took the card and left. Outside, Shui whispered, "Well, how is it? Is the writing amazing?" There was a long silence. "Old Wang, talk to me," Shui urged. "I don't understand," Wang Luo whispered, his voice sounding confused. The boy seemed so cultured, but this handwriting. What about it? It's honestly pretty mediocre, Wang Luo said. "It's not the work of a master at all." Wang Luo kept shaking his head outside the tent. He muttered to himself, his voice full of disbelief. He called my handwriting average. Not just average, but incredibly, painfully ordinary. He even started questioning his own taste in art. I didn't hear him, but the facade was already showing cracks before the sun even rose. Back in the main tent, Captain Shui was unvesting to rest. A voice called out from the darkness, asking if it was okay to enter. It was the big man, the one they called Old San. He walked in with a wide, sycophantic grin. Shui teased him, asking if he'd already forgotten his old captain now that he was busy serving a noble like me. Old San played along, acting terrified, claiming he was only helping me to ease the captain's burden. Shui lay face down on his cot, while Old San began to massage his shoulders with practiced skill. They talked about the world outside. Grain prices were skyrocketing. People were starving, forced to eat lotus roots and husks just to stay alive. Being a soldier was hard, but at least they had a bit of porridge every couple of days. Old Sen had a favor to ask. He wanted to join the escort to Jiangling the next day. He claimed he wanted to use his monthly leave to see his young daughter. Shui laughed, a long, tired sound. He asked if Old San really wanted to see his kid, or if he was just trying to suck up to me. Old San admitted it was a bit of both. He wasn't the only one. Another soldier, Ding Jiao, had even traded 5 liters of his own rations just for a chance to go. Shui warned them not to get their hopes up. He knew how nobles were. They might walk through those palace gates and forget the men who brought them there in a heartbeat. I didn't hear any of this. I spent the night tossing and turning. My mind was a storm of survival strategies and fear. When I did drift off, the nightmares took over. I saw Captain Shui dragging me to an execution block. I saw the 2 travelers I had been captured with lying dead in the grass. I even dreamed I was back in the modern world, standing in a courtroom while they pointed fingers at me. I woke up 4 times, drenched in cold sweat. The stress was so intense I felt a physical urge to vomit. It was lucky that people back then only ate 2 meals a day. I had missed dinner when I arrived, and the camp didn't have enough food for a midnight snack. If my stomach hadn't been empty, I would have ruined the blankets. At dawn, Old Sand arrived with a basin of water. After I washed my face, he handed me a small pinch of salt. I stared at it for a second, then asked if it was for my teeth. He nodded, telling me the captain had ordered it specifically. Commoners would never dream of wasting salt on their teeth. I thought about the old customs I'd read about. I asked him if he had any willow branches. He looked at me like I had lost my mind. He had no idea what I was talking about. I realized then that the practice of using willow branches as toothbrushes hadn't become common yet. "How do you usually brush?" I asked. "With my finger, of course," he replied. I remembered seeing old murals of monks squatting and scrubbing their teeth with their index fingers. That was the reality of this era. I couldn't bring myself to do it. I just mixed the salt with some water, rinsed my mouth, and left it at that. Dingjio brought in my breakfast. It was my first real meal in this ancient world. There was a bowl of thick barley porridge, a few small dried fish, a side of salted greens, and a single boiled egg. It looked simple, but I didn't realize it was a luxury. The dried fish came from Shue's private stash. The egg was from Wang Luo. Even the porridge was special. Most soldiers only got a thin, watery gruel made from crushed grain. This bowl had cost several men their daily rations. I didn't know any of that. All I could think about was the meeting in Jiangling. When I smelled the fish, the stench of it made my stomach turn. It was oily and pungent. I couldn't take a single bite. I stuck to the salted greens and the porridge, trying to ignore the strange, bitter taste. I looked up and saw Old San and Dingzhou watching me. They were staring at the fish, their eyes wide and hungry. I remembered how Old San had helped me the night before. "Old San," I said, pushing the plate toward him. "Take these. Eat them." He dropped to his knees immediately, shaking his head. He said he didn't dare. I put on my best arrogant noble persona. I told him it was a gift from me and that he wasn't allowed to refuse it. He bowed until his head hit the dirt, then took the plate with trembling hands. But he didn't eat. "Why aren't you eating?" I asked. "I want to take them home," he whispered. "I want to give them to my daughter." I looked at him and simply nodded. I didn't have the heart to say anything else. I noticed Ding Zhou staring intensely at the leftover food. I couldn't leave him out, so I spoke up. I told him he had done a good job too. I didn't have much else to give, so I offered him the boiled egg. He froze, looking confused at the word I used. I realized my mistake immediately. In this era, they didn't call them eggs yet. That term came much later. I corrected myself and called it a chicken fruit instead. Ding Zhou nodded, explaining they also called them chicken seeds. He probably thought egg was just some fancy new slang used by the nobility. He thanked me and took it, but his face didn't show much joy. Even though he hadn't tasted a luxury like that in ages, I could see the tension. I had given the fish to Old San and only an egg to him. I realized I hadn't handled the distribution of rewards very well, but I didn't have the energy to worry about hurt feelings. A much bigger crisis was looming. The Great Wall of the city rose before us like a mountain of clouds. We set out at the hour of the sheep and arrived at the gates of Jingzhou by noon. This was one of the greatest provinces of the southern dynasties, a massive territory spanning 10 prefectures. Its capital was Jiangling, a legendary city that poets like Li Bai would one day write about. Under any other circumstances, I would have loved to play the tourist and soak in the history of such a famous place. But I wasn't a tourist, I was a fraud. The thought of facing the real Langia Wang family killed any excitement I had. During the entire journey, I sat in silence, frantically weaving stories and searching for holes in my lies. I even tried to construct a fake family tree in my head, forcing myself to memorize the names of 5 generations of ancestors. Then, the weight of reality hit me. If things actually reached the point where I had to recite a detailed genealogy to prove my identity, I was already dead. A real noble wouldn't be interrogated like a common criminal. We reached a quiet alleyway lined with old, weathered buildings. We stopped in front of an ancient residence that looked surprisingly modest and understated. Captain Xue frowned, leaning over to whisper to Wang the scribe. He asked if he was sure about this place. He couldn't believe that the prestigious Langia Wang family, the household of the great minister, would live in such a plain, low-key house.